podcast. I am with Jacob today. Jacob is a hiring manager at Compare the Market. Jacob, amazing to have you here today. For those who don't know who you are, could you give a little summary and a bit about your background?
So I'm Jacob Vandervelde. I've been in the software industry for 7 years now. I've been a software dev for about 5 years, and over the last 2 years have been a team lead and an IT operations manager at Compare the Market. Recently I've just left and I'm now a senior software engineer for a startup, repeat.gg, which is an async gaming tournament platform. I'm looking forward to making contributions there.
Fantastic. So how long were you at Compare the Market for?
I was at Compare the Market for almost 3 years.
3 years. Wow. So you started there as a software engineer and then moved up to a leadership role, which is
correct. Yeah.
Fantastic in 3 years. What's really interesting, and I speak to quite a few developers who make the leap from development to leadership. What were some of your challenges, I guess, from making that leap, if you like, from going from development to leadership?
There's definitely tension within the team when a co-worker becomes your superior. So that was an interesting transitional period.
I'd really like to dive into that because I actually think a lot of the audience would be really interested to know how you went about dealing with that. So how did you go about managing that?
I think the key was basically reassurance, and you sort of convey a message that you're on the same team. It's not about me being the boss and you being a developer now. It's about, we're trying to achieve the same goals and we're working together, and we should just crack on with it.
And in terms of your mindset at that time, so obviously you were promoted because you were very good at what you were doing. So what I've sort of noticed is when people get promoted is because they are very good at their job, and then when they step into a leadership role, they're better than the other developers because they've been promoted. But how did you go about not wanting to jump in and sort of micromanage, because obviously they were doing your old job, but to step in and encourage instead?
So I think at that point I took a step back from the hands-on coding and put on more of a mentor hat. So it was more about not necessarily critiquing what other people were doing, but in terms of code reviews, for example, making sure that they were achieving the objectives that they were set out to do, and offering insights or recommendations sort of based on history.
And in terms of that whole feedback piece, so when you're sitting down, you're doing those code reviews, if you were to see something that wasn't perhaps at the standard that you would want, how did you go about managing that conversation?
It's just as simple as a conversation. You try and sort of understand their mindset, what they were thinking about. The thing with coding is you can solve one solution a million ways. So they might have done something previously that's a little bit different to how you would have done it, and you just sort of talk through it, and try and come to the same conclusion. And if that doesn't happen, it's not like a slap on the wrist because they've done the wrong thing. It's not even necessarily wrong, it's just different, and their way could be totally more valid than my opinion. So it's just conversations. So
having an open conversation in that sort of safe, I guess, environment where they feel that they can open up to you as well. I think that's really powerful. And looking back sort of in the early days when you first stepped into that leadership role, were there any mistakes that you look back and go, oh, wish I hadn't done that? Or
so I think over the years I've tried to identify things that I don't particularly like about interactions with other people, and one of those is when people commit my time without consulting me first. So there were a few times when general managers or people sort of above me would come to me and say, oh, you need to do this now because I've committed you to it. And in that moment, sort of retrospectively, I would get quite red, and not necessarily aggressive, but very defensive. It's about being mindful of those.
So that all comes. So what I'm getting from that is you were self-aware enough to know that you didn't like that.
Yeah.
So how then did you go about putting in those boundaries, and what did you do to sort of take that
so I mean
pause?
the times it sort of did impact me, for example, a GM came over and said, there's this issue in production, you need to drop everything you're doing and fix it. And I was already resolving the issue, and he was sort of hovering over me and getting more aggressive about it. And at that point I just sort of stopped him and said, look, you and I need to have a conversation in a private room. That was in a very open space in the middle of the dev area.
Right.
So I was sort of taking that confrontation away from everybody else and then just discussing, what the issue was and what I was doing to rectify it.
And resolving it quickly. And I think this is part of the issues you get in probably bigger corporates, is that these things fester and then they can tend to kind of build, and then all of a sudden it just completely explodes.
Things do explode. It's very true. We had a reporting issue once and everyone thought it was the end of the world, but it was just the server time was wrong. And there was really no problem.
And that's all part of the leader, right? To sort of take the overview and just go, right, everyone just take a breath here and let's actually address the real root of the cause.
Very much. You sort of need to slow everyone else down and say, look, let's understand it before we just go restarting servers or shutting things off.
Yeah, exactly. Especially like a big company like Compare the Market. Like you I mean, obviously huge brand and very sort of respected company as well. So it's these things need to be addressed quickly and efficiently. So you've mentioned there a little bit about a few things that people have done poorly in the past. So can you give a few more examples of what you've experienced as that whole poor leadership and the impact it had on you at the time?
So poor leadership of myself, or
no, poor leadership in terms of like what you've experienced, like, but even outside of Compare the Market, so I think we've all worked for people who aren't the best leaders, and it's always interesting how it actually impacted you in that moment when you were, when they were sort of going off on a tangent or whatever they were doing at the time.
I definitely think empathy is a big one. I've worked for previous managers who, over time haven't even sort of asked me how I am. So it could be months without a proper conversation, and I think those build up, those moments of, not having those real human interactions, with your boss or with your manager, and over a long period of time, your relationship sort of breaks down. So I think it's important to have that empathy and that human side of a managerial relationship.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I think empathy is huge. And do you think that's something that can be taught?
It's a tricky one. It is a very, everyone's different, I think. And I think those with a natural tendency to lead generally have those empathy. They've sort of brought up with it. They try and relate to other people. You can be a very successful manager as a stonewall, but I think empathy really empowers the people below you, which is really important.
So in terms of like, I guess, situations that you've been in then that you've had to apply empathy, could you give a couple of scenarios where you had to express empathy to a staff member?
So I think one of the big wins for me as a new team lead at Compare the Market would have been about 2 years ago now. We had a new member join the team. He'd moved here from South Africa. It was his first job in Australia. And he got put on a project, and there was quite a lot of eyes on the project. So he was feeling a bit overwhelmed, wasn't quite sure if he could perform, keep up with the velocity of the team, and just really doubted himself. And so over, a period of weeks, I was sitting with him very regularly, and we were sort of talking through the problems and trying to get to the root of what the issue was. And then I spoke to one of the other team leads, and we moved him around, got him into a more sort of comfortable position where he could, slowly build up that confidence. And 2 years later, even 12 months later, he's one of the top performing members of the team.
Amazing.
And he was on the verge of leaving. Like it was stressing him out so much that he was going to leave the company. And to sort of turn that around was really awesome.
Amazing. And look, absolutely incredible story. And I think that is just proves how empathy is so important. when do you, like, this is where I think the people get like the blurred line. So obviously we can have empathy, but if a staff member is continually underperforming, and empathy will, I mean, for anyone, is going to wear thin. So what is the point that you'd get to where you go, I can't help anymore? Like, you either address this yourself or you're going to have to move on. So where do you think that point is?
Yeah, it's really, really difficult. I think there are times, like every situation is different. You know, sometimes people are willing to accept help. Other times people are more closed off and very anti-help. And I think you just need to assess each situation. If you're not making any headwind with that particular conversation, you know, you can park it and try again the next day. You know, they might be having a particularly bad day. They might be having struggles in their home life. But if you know, find the right moments, even taking that setting outside of an office and getting a coffee or going for a walk really helps, you know, break that tension and sort of get through.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, taking it outside the office. I think that's probably where a lot of people go wrong, because I think when you're on like neutral ground, people are more open. Yep. And how important as a leader do you think it is to get to know people on that personal level?
I think it's hugely important. At one point I had 16 reports that compare the market, and I would get a coffee with every single one of them at least once a fortnight.
Amazing.
So it was really cool. We'd go downstairs, we'd go to the cafe there, we'd get a coffee, and the first 10 minutes would just be talking about personal stuff. You know, sort of easing the tension, getting everyone ready to have a chat. You know, how's your girlfriend, how's your Tinder dating going, and then, you know, tell me what's bothering you about work, and then, you know, you sort of break into that side. Yeah,
amazing. I mean, the amount of people I speak to that, you know, they don't know, you know, their staff members' wives, or, you know, like, you know, children or whatever. And I think it's really important for me with my team to know them on a personal level as well, and what drives them, and, you know, why are you coming to work every day? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Well, talking of which, you have just become a father, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Love to know, like, so now that you're a dad, are you know, obviously you've brought this beautiful life into the world, and I'm sure you'll be like, your head's going a million miles an hour. What kind of world do you want to create for this little person? But how do you think it will change your leadership style, or who you are as a person a bit?
I think I can take a lot of my leadership from the office and take it to home. So I think as a leader, you need to be patient, and again, that empathy and sort of understanding where other people are coming from. And so having this, you know, little baby that's dependent on you, it's pretty incredible. And so, you know, he'll be crying, and you don't get frustrated. You just go, it's okay, you know, and just empathize with them. You know,
I love that. So you're comparing parenting with managing people, which is, it totally makes sense. And my whole philosophy is, everyone's a leader, whether you're a parent or you're managing a team of, you know, 100 people. You know, like, you are leading yourself and that person. So I guess going back into the work world, so you mentioned a little bit before about setbacks and when things went wrong. So how do you sort of keep your team, how did you keep your team motivated when there were setbacks and things weren't sort of always going to plan?
Again, I think it's just a lot of communication. You because you build up that rapport with people, you have that personal, I guess, friendship. You know, you can have a conversation, and, you know, if someone's made a mistake, have a bit of a joke about it. There's been a couple of times when developers have taken down production or done something, and, you know, you come up with a new nickname for them, and, you know, poke a bit of fun at the situation, and just try not to make it so serious. I think fun, just bring it back to being fun. Make it a place where people want to come, have fun, you know, get the work done, but do it in a way where you want to come back the next day. Instead of punishing someone, and then the next day they go, well, I don't want to be here anymore.
Well, that's how people learn as well, right? You know, you make a few mistakes, well, not a few, you make hopefully just one. You learn from that, and it's not making a big mountain out of a molehill and making somebody feel isolated and shame them and make them feel vulnerable. So I think that's really important. And what advice would you give to somebody who, say, they're listening to this right now and they just love everything that you've just said about leadership? They have just been promoted from a software engineer to a team lead. What advice would you give to this person?
get to really know the people who are reporting into you, try and understand what stage of their life they're up to, and use moments of your life to relate. Would be my biggest piece of advice.
I love that. And in terms of that whole leadership piece, I mean, obviously as a leader, I believe, you lead by example. So what do you do sort of, daily, monthly, whatever, to really ensure that you're continuing to learn and develop and improve your own skills?
I listen to a couple of podcasts on Spotify at the moment. Be Awesome at Your Job, I think, is one of them.
Oh, okay.
And I can't remember the other one. It's just saved, so it's easy to hit the play button and continue on. But I think a big thing for me as well is I'm pretty brought into the Google suite of products. And so every time I look up something or research something, I constantly get suggestions around that topic. And so sort of through passive browsing, I get more and more suggestions from Google, which is pretty cool.
I love podcasts as well, so that's incredible. I listen to them, when I'm commuting, when I'm in the gym, and just there. I think they're fantastic. I think that you can just learn something incredible like every single day from people, and power of technology, right?
Yep.
So for people who say they don't have time to learn and develop, what would you say to them?
I think there's always time to even just passively listen to things. While you're cooking, have it on in the background. I like Rocket League, the video game, so I'll play a podcast while playing Rocket League, which you can play with the game without sound. Jogging again. I think there's many moments in your life where you can passively listen to things, and if something, pricks your ear, you can rewind it, which is awesome as well.
I think as well, when people learn and develop themselves, they don't always implement as well. So I think it's really easy to listen to something, I love that, and then you sort of forget about it. So how, when you listen to a podcast and you think that's brilliant, how do you sort of then ensure that you do implement it into your own life?
Yeah, I'm a big doer, so I need to sort of do something to remember it. Yeah. So when I hear something that I think is powerful, I'll try and make a note of it, and then I'll try and do it the first chance I get. So I think one of the takeaways I got from a podcast was the ARC concept, which is appreciate, reciprocate, and then concern. And if you sort of apply that formula to any sort of situation, you can generally get across a concerning message with a nice introduction into that, so they're more receptive to it. And so I found a moment, almost immediately the next day where I could apply that, and Brilliant. It's solidified, I think.
Did it go well?
It did, yeah.
Good. I love that. I'm going to try. Repeat that again. That was
appreciate. Reassure.
Yeah.
And then concern.
Right.
So, I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're on the same team.
Yeah.
But this is a problem and we need to fix it.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I think that's such an incredible, powerful way of addressing things as well. So again, love that you learnt it and then the next day implemented it, because it is all about the speed of implementation. Yeah. And I'm the same. I learn quite a lot every day, and I'll pick the things that I'm really passionate about and go, must try that. And I find as well, if I don't do it the next day, you sort of forget.
A new piece of information comes in and pushes something that you haven't done out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's sort of dive in now into a little bit about hiring, because obviously that's how we met. We've worked together before, which was amazing, and you were really great to work, really good to work for. So in terms of when you come to make hires into your team, what sort of traits do you look for?
Yeah, so I think we're talking about empathy before and how it's something that's difficult to teach, and so for software engineers, a lot of the mechanical or technical skills are things that you can teach. So when hiring, we really look for those soft skills. How do people respond to various questions, various situations and scenarios? Examples of things they've done in the past which are similar to how we would do it at Compare the Market, and try and find similarities. And then just talking about things that interest them and things that they like about technology. Because it's changing so rapidly to try and pick someone based on a technical skill when 12 months later it's a different skill. You need people who can adapt and shift and have a passion for the underlying technology versus this particular framework or language.
Okay, I really want to pull this apart because this is really, really good, and this is something that I am really passionate about. So I totally agree. I think the technology is changing all the time, and you know, if you were hiring for, say, I don't know, a JavaScript framework today, it might be not being used in 18 months' time. So you said the softer skills there. So empathy, huge. What other softer skills would you sort of be testing for?
I think a big one is motivation, how motivated a person is to do a particular task. And then on the sort of flip side of motivation is discipline, is how disciplined they are to achieve their tasks. You know, you can't always rely on motivation, it's a bit fleeting. Whereas if you're disciplined, you achieve what you set out to do. So if someone mentions something that they have set their mind to it, you talk about that and say, okay, did you meet that objective? Why didn't you? What could you have done to, you know, really drive home and then meet that goal? So I think discipline's a big one as well. Absolutely.
And could you give maybe a couple of examples of the types of questions that you would typically ask in an interview?
Yeah, so in technology, a lot of people generally have like side projects or things they do at home or play around with. So you sort of dig into those pastimes. And so you sort of ask about projects that they're doing on the side, you know, what it is they like about them, what are they trying to achieve by doing it. And then if they don't do side projects outside of work, because technology does change so rapidly, you ask questions around how they continue to stay up to date, given that their technology is, you know, 5 years in the past where they're currently working, and just trying to understand, you know, what motivates them about technology, what makes them passionate.
And as a hiring manager, if somebody did have a side project, for some people they would see that as a bit of a red flag. But what's your thoughts there?
I'm all for it. I think it's you can take learnings from work and apply that to your personal life, and you can take learnings from your personal life and apply that back into work. So the more you work and build with various tools and technologies, the better you are as an individual with your skills. So I see it as an absolute win.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a growth mindset right there. So let's talk about maybe a couple of red flags. So what, if you were interviewing somebody, what would be a red flag for you?
I think a big red flag that gets me is when someone constantly says we. So you're sort of asking about their achievements and what they've done and things that they work on, and it's always a collective we, and you never really get a sense for what that individual does, and that's who you want, right? You want the individual. So when you use the we did this, we did that, it's hard to get a clear indication of what they actually contributed. So that's a little bit of a red flag for me.
Which I think is naturally what people say.
It is, yeah. So it's a bit, you sort of need to put in some leading questions about how you contributed to it, and try and get them out of that normal language, really.
Do you think it's a little bit of like a confidence thing? You know, like I don't want to say just me or I. You know, could it be a bit of a self?
It could be, yeah.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about culture, because I think, well, I know we've spoken about culture before in the past. So what do you think defines a good culture?
I think at the end of the day, a good culture is you look forward to going work when you get up. You look forward to going to work when you get up. I think that if you've got people who feel that way coming into work, you've really hit the nail on the head.
And what sort of things could a company do to sort of really try and make that happen?
Yeah, so the dev team at Compare the Market would say a ping pong table.
Okay.
We have one of those upstairs. They're just too lazy to walk up the stairs. But I think it comes back to fun. You're at work for most of your life, most of your day, most of your week. You want to go there and have some jokes with people. You've got a job to do, obviously, but you should get to have fun with it. I think the whole stiff back and very corporate environments could be the death of a lot of people, work wise. But yeah, just making sure people really enjoy them their time while they're at work, so that when they go home they don't need to think about it or process what went well and what didn't go well, and then they can come back the next day looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And how as a manager do you encourage collaboration in your, how did you used to do that in your team?
And so I think meetings are very expensive for companies. It takes a lot of time, and it does cost a lot to get 6 individuals in a room for an hour. And so I think a lot of collaboration you can sort of do asynchronously. So chat messages. So we used Slack at Compare the Market, and you've generally got channels for projects, channels for schools of thinkers, whether they're back-end engineers or front-end or a particular language, and you sort of opt into those communities and you choose how much you want to contribute. And you obviously try and encourage people to contribute, but at the end of the day, if there's someone who doesn't want to, you can't really push them into that. So I think just having those forums and opening up those channels and letting people know, hey, have a chat here, use these avenues to collaborate.
Yeah, perfect. Instead of sitting in a room and, because I think sometimes when people are in a room, they don't always want to put their hand up, whereas when it's online, they feel a bit more comfortable to share their idea.
Yeah, they can paste a link, they can put some emojis in there, they can have a chat, they can think about what they want to write, copy paste it, and they can sort of get their intent right. Whereas when you're in a meeting, you've got 6-7 other people, you need to wait for your turn to speak, you don't know if other people are going to receive it well, and everyone else is sort of thinking about other things as well. You'll get some people in meetings who are just very disengaged. I always found as well, it's always the same people that talk. That's a big one.
And it's giving a voice to the people who maybe are more introverted. And that's really important as well, because I think as soon as people don't feel like they have a say, or they're not being heard, or they're not valued, that's when you get that disengagement. So I think that's really, really, really good way of going about it, and utilizing technology as well. Talking of that, I'd actually just love to get your thoughts about remote working. And there's a big talk about it at the moment. People are, some people are for it, others aren't. What do you think about remote working?
Me personally, I don't like it. Like I don't like to work from home. I like being in an office and surrounded by peers. I get too distracted at home. I have my bed,
you got
the
a baby
kitchen,
now as well.
I got the baby. I got video games. I get too distracted. So I'm disciplined enough to not want to work from home. I've worked from home in the past. I do like it. It's nice to not do the travel, to be in a comfortable, wear your pajamas all day and not worry about what you're wearing. For other people or managing other people, it really does come down to the individual. You can tell most of the time if people are working from home and they're not really working. They're just very AFK, as we say. And then you've got other people who are, they come into the office, they're very hard workers, they're very dedicated, and when they ask for an opportunity to work from home, you're much more inclined to allow it because of how they conduct themselves in the office. I think that's it, because I'm getting a lot of people say to me now, like, do they offer remote working? And I'm like, well, I think it's almost like you've got to go and improve yourself a little bit first. I mean, some people, as a business, we offer remote working straight away because, it's something that we want to do. And I think as a leader, I can't be at home when my team are in the office. So that's what we've done. But I think a lot of people who maybe are working day from home isn't a thing in the business. They want it from day one. And I always say, look, go in, get to know the team, the management, you actually understand what you're doing day to day, and then ask the day from home. So it's always a cringy one when people ask for an interview. I've had that happen a couple of times. So if someone said to you, can I work from home in an interview, would that be a red flag for you? No, I wouldn't say it's a red flag. We at Compare the Market, we say there's a sort of a 3-month trial period where we get to know you, and then we would give you the ability to work from home, and then it's a case by case. So work from home is the exception, not the norm. But we're very open to it. It's very rarely we say no to a request. And when you did that, did you have it all on the same day, or could they pick their days? No, so generally the scenarios where I've got a contractor coming in the morning, can I work from home? Right. It's generally those types of situations.
So it wasn't like a regular thing week by week. That makes sense.
There were occasions when someone needed a recurring day off on a Wednesday, for example, to do something with daycare. And we're amenable to those.
Yeah, and that's great, because then that also actually, the whole daycare piece, that actually then attracts more, a lot of females, going into the tech industry now as well. And I'm all for that. I'm all about empowering women to work in technology. And I think, from having the conversations that I've had with a lot of women, they do want to work for companies who have got that understanding about daycare. So be interesting now, because you're a dad and a parent yourself, what empathy you actually have for the parents who are, trying to juggle being, a mother or a father, and also, coming to work every day and doing their day job. So that'll be an interesting journey for you to go on, and one I'm sure that you'll, become an even better leader from going through that experience. And sort of final question on culture. I think when I've noticed culture sort of starts to not fall apart but become strained is when you do go through periods of hiring and you're bringing in new people into the business. So if you've got quite a close-knit team, which sounds like you did, how would you bring this newbie in and incorporate them and sort of keep that culture close-knit at the same time?
So I would basically be the go-to person for the first week or two of a new starter's life at Compare the Market. Generally the first day would always start with a lunch, and they were very informal. I'd walk through the office shouting, "Who wants to come for pizza?" And then it's just finding those moments where you can include them. So the ping pong table upstairs, let's go upstairs and have a hit. It's just about trying to find as many moments as you can to include that person. If they're not going to be confident because they are new and they're trying to get their feet and understand who are the loud people, who are the quiet people, who are the people they can relate to. I think it's just just try and find as many opportunities to include them. Yeah,
I love that. And final question: if you could summarize in one sentence what the role of a leader is, what would you say?
It's to empower, to empower those who you lead.
Amazing. Jacob, thank you so much. I certainly got a lot from that, and I'm sure everyone that listened to will as well. So where can people find you if they wanted to look you up?
LinkedIn. I actually don't know my LinkedIn name. I think it's just Jacob Vandervelde.
We'll put a link. Cool. Well, thank you so much. And honestly, I think, good luck in your new role. And I really look forward to, working with you again and seeing how you develop as a leader, because I think you've got some amazing traits already. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mindfully podcast. If you enjoyed it, please share it with at least one of your friends. And please leave a comment. Please like this podcast. It would mean the world to me. Let's connect. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. Georgie Hubbard on LinkedIn. Georgie L. Hubbard on Instagram. I hope you have a beautiful day. I look forward to bringing you lots more content, lots more value. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.